As a reminder, today's event has been set up to adhere to social distancing guidelines as outlined by health experts. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Kingswood Community Center. Actually, that's the one down I used to work. As a joke. You didn't know where we were. Anyway, it's great to be here and back at a place where, I want to thank Wayne Jefferson for having us here at the Hicks Anderson Center. Everybody from Delaware, everybody knew who Hicks was. He was deeply involved in social justice issues and politics of the state for a long time, and was really very much engaged back in the days when after Dr. King was assassinated and this city was in flames. And he was a good friend, and I want to thank him for us. I used to work over in the East Side. I got to know Hicks very well because he did a lot of work over there as well. And, folks here at this center, as Wayne will tell you, are doing God's work. This community center gives people hope and a place to belong. I saw hope as a senator when, as I said, I watched my son, the Attorney General of Delaware, Beau Biden. He would attend Mass at Sacred Heart just up the street here, and then he'd walk here with his notebook in hand in his pocket and sit around for the better part of the day and see if he could find ways to help and see what they may need or not need. And it was on the, as I said, the East Side where I was a teenage lifeguard and my career as a public defender started. That's how I got so involved with the community. And this center, as I said, is named after my buddy, Hicks Anderson. He was everybody's friend. Hicks and I went way, way back. We just walk around Wilmington, and everyone has a story about Hicks. How he cared, how he always was there for you, and how he built a wonderful family, including twin sons who gave back so much to this community and continue to do. They served in the United States Army, and now they're serving jointly as the Poet Laureates of the state of Delaware. And Nnamdi is a state representative, and Hicks and his family and everyone else at this center embody the defining story of America. For generations, Americans who were black, brown, Native American, immigrants have always been found they pushed out, not fully included from our democracy and our economy. And it's by pure courage, heart, and grit they never gave up as they pursued the full promise of America. That's the story of the people of this community and of this country. That's why I couldn't think of a more meaningful place to talk about my Build Back Better economic agenda. A bold, practical plan that's going to help build a stronger and a more just and sustainable economy for everybody this time included. And it's a story of two civil rights heroes we lost last week. One who shows the way forward, each of them their separate ways. Reverend C.T. Vivian, who faced down drownings, beatings, and his comment was, "You can't turn your back upon the idea of justice." Enormous courage. And my friend, an American hero, Congressman John Lewis, who crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge one last time on Sunday, who once said, "Freedom is not a state, it's an act." I've been over the bridge twice, once with him, and I thought I knew a lot about it. Until you walk that bridge, and some of you have done it, and you get to the crest of the bridge, the first time you can see down the other side. When I walked over with him a couple years ago, I thought to myself, what in God's name did it take in terms of internal fortitude, courage, to walk down there seeing those folks with clubs and on horses waiting at the bottom of the bridge with no way back. I spoke to John just before he died. He was on his deathbed, and they said he could talk, he wanted to talk. Instead of answering my concerns for him, he asked about me. He asked about us. He asked that we stay focused on the work left undone to heal this nation, to remain undaunted by the public health crisis and the economic crisis, taking the blinders off in this crisis and showed the systemic racism for what it is that plagues this nation. People have seen now. Those people allowed them to shelter in place. All those folks risking their lives, stacking the shelves in the supermarkets, farming the food, getting it to our tables. All those folks, most of whom are black and brown. One thing the Senate and the President can do right away is pass the bill to restore the Voting Rights Act. Just yesterday, it was renamed in the Congress in memory of John Lewis. You know, back the effusive praise we heard since he passed, especially from many of our Republican friends. Back it with some action. Protect that sacred right to vote that he was willing to die for. If they don't, I've been saying all along, it's one of the first things I'll do as president if elected. We can't let the fundamental right to vote be denied, especially in the middle as this pandemic rages on. Nearly 150,000 dead from COVID-19 and counting. More than 4 million Americans have tested positive and counting. Black and Latinos are 3 times as likely to be infected and twice as likely to die from the virus as white people. More than 30 million and counting are collecting unemployment checks. Black unemployment is at 15%, Latino 14.5%. 40% of black-owned businesses, 440,000 in total, have reported they had to shut down. And everything is worsened by this crisis of presidential leadership. To change the tone over the last few days, as Trump has, doesn't change the facts of the last 4 years. Donald Trump faces a real test, and he's failed it. The basic threshold of being president, the duty to care for the entire country, not just his re-election prospects. He's shown that he can't beat the pandemic and keep you safe. He can't turn the economy around and get America back to work. And he is horrifyingly and not surprisingly intentionally stoking the flames of division and racism in this country. I've said from the outset of the recent protests that there's no place for violence or destruction of property. Peaceful protesters should be protected, and arsonists and anarchists should be prosecuted. And local law enforcement can do that. When President Obama and I were in office, we protected federal property. We were able to do it without the Department of Homeland Security turning it into a private militia. And it could be done today. But that wouldn't help Trump's political interest. He's determined to stoke division and chaos. It's not good for the country. But Donald Trump doesn't care. His campaign is failing, and he's looking for a political lifeline. This isn't about law and order. It's about a political strategy to revive a failing campaign. Every instinct Trump has is to add fuel to the fire. It's the last thing we need. We need leadership that will calm the waters and lower the temperature. That's how we'll restore peace in the streets. But this election is not just about voting against Donald Trump. It's about rising to this moment of crisis, understanding people's struggles, and building a future worthy of their courage and their ambition to overcome. Last month, I stopped at Bethel AME Church here in Wilmington, not far from here. I talked to a group of faith and local leaders. They shared their pain, their anger, and their frustration at the state of affairs in our justice system, our healthcare system, our politics, our economy. There's just a sense, and it's real, that the deck is stacked against the community. The common theme was, how do we break the cycle? In good times, communities of color still lag. In bad times, they get hit first and the hardest. And in recovery, they take the longest to bounce back. This is about justice. I proposed a criminal justice reform and policing reform agenda that I'm committed to working with the Congress to see it through as president. It's also about jobs, good-paying jobs, financial stability, building wealth for families of color, and passing it down to their kids. It's about economic growth for our country and outperforming the rest of the world to stay ahead. It's also about dignity for working people and the middle class. Many of you heard me say it before. My dad had an expression. He'd say, "Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community." And he'd end by saying it's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, "Honey, it's going to be okay," and mean it. But over 50% of the people in America don't think it's going to be okay for their kids, that they'll never meet the standard of living they had. Over the last few weeks, I've laid out my Build Back Better plan based on necessities and on the idea we can't just build back to what it was before. We have to build back better, and this time bring everybody along. We need to make bold, practical investments to recover from the economic mess we're in and to rebuild the economic future our country deserves. I've explained how these investments will be paid for. I've laid it out. Today, I'm here to explain how the Build Back Better plan will deal with systemic racism and advance racial equity in our economy. So far, the Build Back Better plan has had three parts I've spoken to. First, investing in American manufacturing and technology so the future is made in America, and it includes all Americans, not just the 7 cities the vast majority of venture capital has gone to. Under my plan, We will mobilize the biggest investment in rebuilding our country since World War II, creating millions of good-paying union jobs. It includes a historic investment in federal procurement, which is the way government purchases goods and services. Under my proposal, we'd make sure those goods and services are American-made and American supply chains, like American steel for building and energy-efficient vehicles and battery technology and so on. But for too long, federal contracting for this work has been inaccessible to too many black and brown entrepreneurs and businesses. They too often never get a fair shot to apply. My plan makes sure that contractors and subcontractors of color get a fair shot. We're going to triple the existing federal goal for contracting with small disadvantaged businesses from 5% to a minimum of 15% by 2025. We'll create jobs and growth along the way. We can do that. The second plank in Build Back Better advances racial equity by mobilizing our infrastructure and taking on climate change with jobs. Take infrastructure, for example. In too many underserved communities of color, the roads are falling apart, street lights are out, sidewalks are cracked, school buildings outdated and unsafe, parks aren't safe for the kids to play in or adults to exercise in. There's nowhere you can go to buy fresh food from miles away. Air pollution causes childhood asthma that follows them through their adult lives and affects their overall health condition. Abandoned homes crush property values and diminish the quality of life in the neighborhoods they exist. But notwithstanding these systematic barriers, look at the energy, pride, and achievement of communities of color. Just imagine if we could truly unleash their full potential. My Build Back Better plan would make sure families in these communities are the ones who benefit from the hundreds of billions of dollars in federal investment, taxpayer dollars that already have to be invested by the administration in purchasing things, to rebuild roads, fill those cracks in the sidewalks, instill broadband, close the digital divide, create spaces to live and work and play safely, where you can drink clean water, breathe clean air, and shop at a nearby grocery store with a fresh stock of healthy food. We can't rebuild our economy and meet this climate crisis unless we create opportunities for people to build their own communities. This is about jobs. It's also about dignity. It's about pride. I'm confident we can do this. The third plank in my Build Back Better investment is in caregivers who take care of our loved ones and our kids. If we truly want to reward the work in this country, we have to ease the financial burdens of care that families are carrying. We have to elevate the compassion, benefits, and dignity of caregiver workers and early childhood educators. Families are squeezed emotionally and financially, trying to raise their kids and care for their parents or loved ones living with a disability. My guess is, and some of you have been through that, with a parent who's ill and can't take care of themselves. You have to make the choice of going to work or staying home and take care of them because the cost is so incredible. Or a young child under the age of 5 figuring out how you pay for it. I was a single parent for 5 years with a lot of help. And I had a good salary. I was making $42,000 a year. Without my family, I couldn't have done it. They need help, but often they can't afford it. And the professional caregivers out there, home health workers, child care workers, who are often women of color, and immigrants, are too often underpaid, underseen, and undervalued. But these are things we can do right now to ease the burden. My plan would clear the waiting list that exists now of 800,000 people who are eligible for home and community care for a loved one through Medicaid who've signed up but are waiting. 800,000. My plan would make sure every 3- and 4-year-old child gets access to free, high-quality preschool like students have at this center, what I do with Title I schools. And low- and middle-income families won't spend more than 7% of their income on child care for children under the age of 5. The most hard-pressed working families won't have to spend a dime because it'll be free. My plan would pay and support our caregivers, who overwhelmingly, as I said, are women of color. This plan to help workers, especially those without college degrees, gain new skills in good-paying industries like healthcare, and provides a pathway to advance their careers. For example, a home health care worker under this plan will have access to training needed to become an EMT or a nurse or physician's assistant. We don't just put millions of Americans to work in new care and early childhood education jobs. We'll also free up millions more to rejoin the paid workforce. Studies indicate at least 2 million additional jobs will be created and more economic growth for our nation. And the economy as a whole will grow. We can do this. Today, I'm laying out a fourth part of my Build Back Better plan, advancing racial equity across the American economy, not just part of the other pillar of Build Back Better, but this is in its own right. To start, we create a new Small Business Opportunity Fund. It dramatically expands on the successful Obama-Biden initiative that generated more than $5 billion and $5 in private equity for every $1 in public investment in a small business, particularly in hard-pressed areas. We're going to take $30 billion of our Made in America investment, I announced earlier this year, and put it into this fund. It will allow the expanded federal support for the most effective state, local, and nonprofit programs to provide venture capital and financing for minority business owners and communities in need. It will also allow us to support community development banks that have a proven record of investing in minority small businesses. That $30 billion is estimated to leverage $150 billion in new financing and equity for more Black and brown small businesses. So our Small Business Opportunity Fund supports an investment in a small manufacturer of color seeking to commercialize a new technology, for example. That helps the manufacturer get started. Then private investors, we know, notice the promise of that business and invest their private dollars as well. That helps manufacturers scale and grow. That's how we'll make sure that those with the best ideas are not denied the venture capital or financing they need because of race or zip code. And here's why it matters. Right now, we're in the midst of one of the greatest threats to small businesses our country has ever seen. What Donald Trump doing about it? Well, he's given big banks the green light to loan millions of dollars that they're covered for by the federal government and make millions of dollars in fees by favoring their most well-off and well-connected clients while shutting the door on smaller Black and brown business without these connections. You all remember, some of you covered when I first laid out what I thought needed to be done in the first recovery plan put forward by the Congress. I said the President should use the authority he has under the Defense Production Act to force big banks to have to lend to small businesses. They're guaranteed the loan. We bailed them out before, forced them to lend. But what did they do? Do you have a credit card with us? Have you established credit with us? Do you have a bank account with us? The list goes on. And they're denied. The result? Billions of dollars in COVID relief programs for small businesses benefit ones who had lawyers and accountants to help them better connect to businesses, jumped to the head of the line, and the big banks accommodated. Black and brown small businesses that needed the help most got shut out. In fact, just 12% of black and brown businesses surveyed seeking help got the aid they asked for. Now, half of them say they're going to have to close up shop, and they're a major source of employment in America. Our economy can't afford for them to close. Their families can't afford for them to close. Under my plan, 50% of emergency small business relief would be reserved for the smallest businesses of 50 or fewer employers. Right now, we're talking 500. They are small business compared to the Fortune 500, but do you think most people think the neighborhood stores have 500 employees are small business? Ride down the main streets of so many small towns around America and big towns and see them shuttered. This would help minority-owned business get life-saving loans before the well-connected businesses jump to the head of the line. But removing the barriers for black and brown entrepreneurs to start and grow businesses is only one of many things we have to do to close the racial wealth gap in this nation. Expanding black and brown home ownership is another. Today, American cities, there are a number, where about 75% of white Americans own their homes, only 25% of black and brown citizens or black citizens own their homes. Even in the middle class communities of color, the same homes that exist in the white community are often valued significantly less. Those black residents then see their wealth accumulate much more slowly. Many of you are from families like mine, middle-class families. Where do my parents accumulate any ability to borrow and generate any wealth? In their home. That's how it got built. That's how a lot of us are able to send our kids to school, to borrow against that. When a house is an asset that helps build equity and wealth, the home ownership disparity denies equal opportunity. My housing plan is going to be a major